Have you ever had a game that seemingly found you by complete fate? A game that you heard so much about and kept seeing it all over the place. Friends, videos, or other properties entirely reminding you of its existence. All of the indirect persuasion eventually leading you to checking out said game to see what all the hype was about. And for what you expected to be an alright adventure, ended up being nothing short of a masterpiece. Well, I can certainly say that I've had an experience just like this one. A game which has went from being one that was almost unknown to me to being my favorite game of all time. A game that has even inspired me to want to try out completely new genres, Souls-like and Metroidvanias to be exact. And by those two genres that I just stated, chances are that you know I'm talking about Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight has become my favorite game to date. The art style, the depth, the characters, the uniqueness, everything. I love this game so utterly much that please, for your own sake, do not continue watching this video if you plan on playing it. This video will contain several spoilers for the game, and I love it too much to ruin any of your enjoyment out of it. And with that aside, Hollow Knight has so many great and fantastic moments, all of which I adore. However, there is one specific section that I do wish to talk about. One part of this game that I haven't seen anyone give it the in-depth analysis it so utterly deserves. But what could that be? All of the content surrounding my channel has been centered somewhat around horror. But Hollow Knight isn't a horror game. Well, people who have seen or played Hollow Knight would know that there are in fact horror elements. The terrifying deepness, the unnerving story, and the disturbing bosses. And then there's the combination of it all. Yep, I do indeed think that Nosk is mediocre as all hell. April Fools. I don't know what else I could put in the script, so I guess just April Fools. Okay, bit's over. Yeah, so the big twist of this video is that the video is not about horror at all. My first being so. I wanted to do something for April Fools, but I hate making bad content. So, happy April 1st. But wait, if this video isn't about horror, then what specific option could I pick out of all of this? Well, I do still want to talk about a boss. A boss that hasn't been given the proper amount of analysis it so utterly deserves. That's right, we are talking about the titular character, Hollow Knight, and how their boss is one of the best, if not the best, I have ever seen, played, or simply experienced. Now, when you think of the picture of a final boss, you are typically thinking of a boss that is meant to be hard. Especially when it comes to a game like Hollow Knight. So many of the other bosses in Hollow Knight are meant to give you a run for your money. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if on your first attempt, beating Mantis Lords, Soulmaster, and Brooding Moloch took you a few tries. And those are just the easy ones. It's a whole different story when you're talking about Failed Champion, Nightmare King Grim, and this bitch. However, Hollow Knight, the boss, actually isn't really hard. Instead, the fight is actually kind of easy, but that works in its favor. Obviously, this fight isn't a fight that you will be able to beat on your first try, but it still is easy. Especially in my playthrough, where I fought all of the dream bosses before fighting Hollow. But just cause I found him easy doesn't mean he was boring. Quite the opposite, in fact. Hollow Knight has a variety of different attacks just to start off. He can swing his sword in a multitude of different ways, dash at you quickly, and even parry some of your attacks. A lot of this might seem a bit lame compared to many of the other bosses we can face in this game, but I feel like this is needed for this boss. With the many different bosses in this game, one can expect many to fall under certain categories, and there is one of these categories to which I am a complete sucker for. These bosses aren't meant to feel overpowering, but instead they rely on a multitude of different attacks to keep you on your toes. Fights that feel like a true fight between warriors on even ground. Foes like Hornet, the Mantis Lords / Sisters of Battle, Hive Knights, and Not You truly perfect this formula. But Hollow Knight truly captures the feeling of this. Despite his size, you truly feel entertained while fighting him, giving it your all to overcome them, not to mention that this is basically the final boss of your journey, making you extra excited. When watching this without any knowledge of previous playthroughs, you would think that this boss would be very intimidating and very overpowering. But instead, the way that you have to be agile to dodge their attacks makes it very entertaining and still feels like a fight between warriors. In fact, one of the only reasons why I consider this boss to be easy is how you can easily exploit some of the game's mechanics, especially if you have abilities like Moth Wings and Shadow Dash. Well, are his attacks at least strong? Well, no. None of them cause double damage or cover a large portion of the screen. However, this isn't all the fight has to offer, because soon, Hollow then utters a roar and uses new attacks to kill you. They can now shoot projectiles and summon black pillars to damage you. These attacks not only add more variety to the fight, but they are also more difficult and dangerous. The dark pillars dealing double damage, while the projectiles are pretty hard to dodge if you don't have Shadow Dash. While these attacks are more difficult, they still aren't too difficult, just enough for the fight to be tougher. But the fight still maintains to be more entertaining due to how the difficulty is now ramping up, without it being too distracting. It adds a fun escalation to the entirety of the fight, making things not feel too complicated, but still giving you a nice sense of progression. However, all of that comes crashing down once Hollow Knight enters their next phase. This sudden, out-of-nowhere twist is wonderful. When I first encountered it, I was nothing but stunned. I couldn't keep the pattern I was doing before purely due to the shock value. Throughout this entire game, each separate boss had attacks and abilities which varied extremely, and many of them did still have escalation in unique ways, but none of them had something that even remotely resembled this. And what makes it worse, for the better, is that this makes the fight easier. Hollow doing this takes a pretty long while, giving you plenty of time to heal, making it very hard for you to die on this boss if you have enough soul. And if you're at full health or just don't have enough soul to heal, you can get so many free hits on him while he's stabbing himself. And him doing this isn't even him being staggered. In fact, he staggers right after this, giving you even more time. It's essentially impossible to not have an opportunity to hit him, and he does this so often that you can easily get the majority of your hits in this entire fight by him doing this alone. The only times I ever died to him was whenever I was goofing around or on try 30th when trying to fight Radiance. However, the attacks that come after do balance this out well. These brand new attacks are more difficult to dodge than the rest, but this fight takes these kinds of attacks to its advantage. Each of these attacks are incredibly disturbing and disgusting in a way that differs from any other enemy that also has disturbing or disgusting attacks. And overall, these are just sad. Hollow gets ragdolled by seemingly the bubbles of infection inside him to flow in a possession-like pose as he spews out infection to damage you, or Hollow just simply gets smashed along the ground himself. No other attack in Hollow Knight matches these. Sure, we had projectile spam attacks and slamming attacks, but none like this. And the fact that you only have to dodge and how long these attacks go on for makes your full attention be on Hollow and their sad husk-like state. These attacks aren't meant to be difficult in any way, shape, or form, just difficult enough where you have to watch Hollow. And they don't even put your life at risk due to the amount of self-harm Hollow does over the course of the fight. And if you thought we were done, Hollow unleashes one final phase, but instead of ramping up the difficulty, he just does the previous phase, but easier. Rather than adding new attacks, this part pretty much removes all but 2 of Hollow's main attacks, that being their Grand Slam attack, the most depressing out of the bunch, and his swing attack. Oh, and make sure to put the swing inside font 16 size quotation marks, as he barely even manages to get in one swing before staggering himself. In fact, he even staggers himself after he does the slam attack, making it so the only really way that you can be damaged in this phase is from him accidentally falling over and damaging you due to contact damage, or you just being an idiot. Oh, and we are not even done with the staggers, as even after that, Hollow Knight then decides that stabbing himself should become a pastime of theirs. The fights went from something exciting and entertaining to something sad and unappetizing. The more this phase goes on, the more you feel like you don't deserve to win. The grand, epic, honorable feeling of this fight has essentially been drained away entirely. You don't even feel like you're doing the majority of the damage anymore, because Hollow is stabbing himself too much to be considered healthy. And the ending is aware of the depressing nature of this boss, more than it has any right to be. When you finally defeat Hollow and then get told to use focus, you start feeling energized again. It's a welcome surprise for sure. But you are still very hesitant about how far you can go, because again, this fight doesn't feel like one that you deserve to win. You can see Hollow crunched over as he has been defeated by you, but it doesn't feel like you truly defeated him. When you actually start going forward about it, as your curiosity has beaten you, everything starts to build up. You are expecting a grand epic finale, but as soon as it all reaches its peak, it's all gone. The attention should be going somewhere, or at least drawn out, but it just cuts to the ending. The ending that follows isn't that grand either. It's slow, cool, yes, but slow. Then you watch as Ghost is trapped by chains, as everything slowly starts to descend into something less than a shell of what you wanted. You should feel good. You beat the game, but you don't feel anything. And that is the masterpiece behind this boss. The boss starts off great and entertaining, a fight against 2 nail wielders. Things start to ramp up, but the fight slowly descends into a husk of what it once was. There are entertaining portions for sure, but it loses its grandness. And all of that satisfaction that you once had was taken away in a moment's notice. The fight is gone. You don't feel like you deserve to win. Half of the fight was giving free opportunities to you on a silver platter. Half of the fight regarded on your enemy fighting himself. And the win you got is depressing. It's one thing to get a bad or unappetizing ending after a hard boss. At least you overcame the hard challenge and you feel good about it. But this boss was too easy. You don't feel or have any satisfaction of defeating a hard boss, and the ending itself tells you that you will become little more than the Hollow Knight. But rather than making me dislike the boss, this obviously meant I loved it. This way of making you feel unsatisfied is perfectly done and doesn't feel worthless at all. But that was one ending. We still have 2 more regarding this boss. Each of these endings both have THK be the same, so I won't be talking about them too much. But both are still worthy to talk about, as they both each have different feelings in regard to the fight, even if they are both at the very end. Getting the Sealed Siblings ending takes the despair of winning to a whole different level. While it doesn't hit quite as hard as the first time, it surely does feel like you have ruined the chances of a victory, especially when you look at the aftermath. As you attack Hornet and get free hits on Hollow Knight, you get the pleasant look of seeing Hornet being tossed around as you ruined a good ending for everyone. And all of that is just because she said, understandable reasoning, I suppose. But the ending doesn't do too much than that. THK still does the exact same thing. You just feel more guilt as you are banished from any possibility of a good ending. This is unappetizing in a still wonderful but amazingly different way. Your need to explore the options to get a secret boss or ending ends up leaving you with nothing. Even the ending doesn't have anything else to offer than Hornet's unmoving body. But what if you decide to go along with the wonderful plan to get the good ending? Well, still not too much. You find an entirely different boss, a boss that I won't be covering. I do love this boss, but come on, this video is already going to be too long. The transition from an absolutely depressing atmosphere to one that is magnificent and grand is a wonderful case of whiplash. And while this isn't gameplay, I have to at least point out Hollow Knight's inclusion in the Radiant's boss fight. Hollowy Wallowy helping and assisting you in taking down Radiant feels so magnificent. For starters, you know a lot more about THK now. You have seen the relationship, and you have grown even more fond of them as you've seen more backstory. But even if you had none of that, seeing the boss who was trying to stop themselves from fighting you, now here to assist you in killing the enemy you both need to get rid of, is a wonderful turn of events, and one that was so imaginably epic the first time I saw it. Phew, that was a lot for one section. So, let's talk about the other parts.